This video is sponsored by Scentbird. Hello friends! It has been a minute since I have sat down to film a video, and today's video I am so excited about because today I am finally going to be doing the if you liked this television series, check out this book. Let's get started. Hello friends, it is lovely to see you. It is lovely to be sitting down and filming. I have to tell you, I have not filmed like a proper sit down video in several weeks now. So today we are doing the if you liked this television series, you will hopefully like this book. I have put so much research into this. Not only have I gone through my own shelves, but I've also gone through like blog posts and Reddit posts and like random things trying to find different books. And I feel like I actually did a fairly good job, maybe, question mark, I don't know. So hopefully if you enjoy certain TV shows that I'm going to talk about, you will find some new book recommendations. And also please feel free in the comments to recommend books that you also think would match these TV series as well. But before we get into today's video, I would like to thank today's sponsor, which is Scentbird. Hello readers. If you love luxury designer perfume, then you will love Scentbird. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service. You choose a new designer fragrance to try out every month for just $17. I love it because I'm actually obsessed with perfumes, which you probably know after watching my last favorites video, and Scentbird helps me to afford luxury fragrance at a fraction of the price. You can also skip any month you'd like without penalty, and there are over 600 designer brands to choose from. And if you don't know where to start with Scentbird, but you're interested in trying out a new perfume, you can actually take their quiz. Their quiz is so much fun, and it actually helps you to narrow down your interests in the perfume world. I love perfume so much that I was already pretty confident in what I was going to like. However, it was really fun to take the quiz because the quiz definitely confirmed what I already knew, which was that I tend to lean towards amber scents, vanilla scents, think like soft romantic. A great example might be like Poets of Berlin. Maybe also throw in something a little woodsy too. So I went ahead and requested 2 different scents from Scentbird, and then they very kindly gifted me another 2 scents. The first scent that I chose was Electric Wood from Room 1015. The notes for this one include nutmeg, iris, oak wood, cedar, and ambroxan. Ambroxan? It smells like amber. Cool. It smells really sensual and really romantic, and also still very soft. The next one that I chose was Sandalwood and Oak, and this is from Scents of Wood. And the notes for this one are sandalwood, burnt sugar, smoked sage, and vanilla. I feel like the burnt sugar is really light, but it helps to balance out the entirety of the scent. And again, it feels very romantic, and it makes me feel super sophisticated when I'm wearing it. And then I have to be honest, in a shocking plot twist, as much as I am obsessed with the first 2 scents, I actually think I prefer the 2 that Scentbird picked out for me, so clearly they know what they're doing. The first one that they sent to me was Just Bloom, and I think it's by Story Venezian, and the notes for this one are Lily of the Valley, Gardenia, and also ambergris. And then the last one that they sent to me is called All of Me, and this is by Derek Lamb. And the notes for this one are juicy pear, watery accord, iris, freesia, and sultry musk. So if you love perfume, I could not recommend Scentbird enough. I absolutely adore all of the scents that were sent to me today. So again, a big thank you to Scentbird. And if you are interested in checking them out, you can actually use my code, which is Alexandra55, to get 55% off of your first order. So again, if you are interested in Scentbird, you can actually go ahead and check my links down below, and you can also use my code Alexandra55 to get your very first purchase for 55% off. And thank you once again to Scentbird for sponsoring today's video. And now let's get back to the video. Okay, well let's go ahead and get started. Also, this coffee is fire. Oh my God. The first television series that we will be diving into is going to be Stranger Things. If you don't know what Stranger Things is about, it's amazing. It's categorized as horror. Nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you that it's scary. They just say that it's amazing. So the first time I started watching this, I was in for a bit of a shock. The show itself is following a group of friends who are playing Dungeons and Dragons, and the Dungeons and Dragons game sort of seems to foreshadow what's going to happen. One of the members of their friend group, whose name is Will, actually goes missing, and the entirety of the series is trying to find out what happened to Will. At the exact same time, there's actually a a girl who shows up named 11, and Mike and his other friends have to basically find out what happened to Elle and protect her. And there's this huge mystery going on. And all of this also takes place in the 80s. Okay, so if you liked Stranger Things, you might like My Best Friend's Exorcist by Grady Hendrix or Paper Girls. Who wrote this? Oh my God. There's no name on the cover. There's no name on the cover? Is that allowed? Brian K. Vaughan. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with this one. This is horror just like Stranger Things, and we are following two best friends. The entire thing takes place in the 80s, so right off the bat, we've got the 80s vibes, we've got the horror vibes, but also we've got the bestie vibes. I think one of the reasons so many people love Stranger Things is because of the impeccable best friend vibes. It's so wholesome and so sweet, and you want to protect all of these kids and their friendships with your life, and that's exactly how I felt about the friendships in this particular book. This book is following two besties, Abby and Gretchen. What Grady Hendrix does so well is like really showing their relationship and how they become best friends over the years, and you just like love them so much together. They are my favorite platonic soulmates that I've ever read about. One of them ends up getting possessed by a demon, which, you know, that's a bad day right there. And so Abby actually has to try saving her best friend Gretchen through the power of friendship and also of Madonna. If you love horrific, scary, terrifying things, and you also love a good bestie moment, this is going to be the book for you. And I could not recommend it more for fans of Stranger Things. And then this one I actually found on so many different Reddit posts and threads and blog posts and recommendation comments on like Goodreads and things. And so I had to pick it up. I've heard so many people also say that this is incredible. I don't really know a lot about it. It says on the back, in the early hours after Halloween of 1988, four 12-year-old newspaper delivery girls uncover the most important story of all time. I've heard that this has supernatural elements to it. I've heard that this is really creepy. And I've heard that this has very strong Stranger Things vibes. I also feel like aesthetically, the color palette really feels like Stranger Things. Specifically, I'm thinking of Stranger Things season 3. I feel like they used a lot of like these neon colors in their cinematography. This might be a winner. The next one is going to be Only Murders in the Building, which has my whole entire heart. This is a very wholesome comedy. It's also a mystery, and you can watch this on Hulu. We are following three people who all live in this building in Manhattan, and there is a murder that actually takes place in the building, and the three of them actually think that there is more behind the story than the police are saying there is, and so they decide to try to solve this murder themselves and also host a podcast in real time trying to figure out what's happening. This is one of my favorite series of all time. I just think it's so funny and also so entertaining. Okay, so I have three different recommendations because this particular one has like a lot of elements to it. We've got the podcast element, we've got a mysterious murder in a building element where we can't trust any of the neighbors, and we also have the trying to figure this out ourselves while also trying to not get murdered. So the first one is going to be pretty obvious, and that is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. Tonally, this is different. This is not a comedy, but on paper, the plot is very similar. We're following a girl named Jess, and Jess goes to visit her brother in his Paris apartment when he is missing, and now she has to try to figure out what actually happened to him, and all of the residents and people who live in this building are very sketchy, and they all have secrets to hide. So we're kind of trying to solve a mystery just like the mystery in Only Murders in the Building. The next book recommendation is for those of you who enjoyed the podcast element. So you enjoyed the idea of someone trying to solve this in real time and then also hosting a podcast. I recommend checking out Sadie. This is YA, and this particular story is following Sadie. Sadie has gone missing after her sister has been brutally murdered, and no one knows what happened to her, and no one knows where she disappeared to. And while we are uncovering what's happening in real time to her, we are also following along with a podcast host who is trying to decipher what really happened to Sadie. So it does have a lot of those elements of Only Murders in the Building, but again, this is a lot more serious. If you're gonna pick this one up, or if you're gonna pick up The Paris Apartment, highly recommend the audiobook for both. And then the last one is a book that I have not read, but I think is going to fit the vibes, and that is The Thursday Murder Club, and this is by Richard Oseman. This is an adult mystery. I have heard that this is a little bit more light and a little bit more comedic, so I feel like the vibes of this will probably fit the vibes of the television show. This is about a group of people in a retirement home. They love to get together on Thursday nights and kind of like dissect true crime podcasts and true crime mysteries together, when one day there is an actual murder that happens across the street and they decide to try to find out what happened and solve the case together. So you can already see a lot of similarities between this and the television series. I think that if you are looking for something that's going to match it a little bit better tonally, this is probably your best option as well. Okay, I'm on fire! Next up is going to be the Gilmore Girls. Iconic, amazing, incredible. So the Gilmore Girls is following Rory Gilmore and her mom, Lorelai. Lorelai comes from a lot of money and she ended up leaving when she got pregnant at 16 to raise Rory herself. And we are following their relationship as well as the relationship between her and her very, very wealthy parents. And it's all about Rory, who is very, very smart and a bookworm, and her mom. So I have 2 books here and hopefully they will both fit the bill for the Gilmore Girls. The first one that I recommend is going to be One Italian Summer, and this is by Rebecca Serle. So this book is following Katie, and when Katie's mother passes away, she is absolutely devastated because she feels like she has lost her best friend. She ends up going to Italy because they were planning on going to Italy together, and she wants to try grieving for her mom alone. And while she is there, some weird magical thing happens where she goes back in time and she ends up meeting her mom when her mom was her age, and they get to spend one last summer together being best friends. First of all, this book actually opens up with a quote from the Gilmore Girls, which I think is iconic. Second of all, the audiobook is literally read by Lorelai Gilmore, which I know that's not the actress's name, but it's narrated by the actress, which I think is perfect for fans of the Gilmore Girls. And third, if you are looking for something with strong mother-daughter like bonds, this is like definitely, I think, the book that you should reach for. And next up we have something that again is slightly different tonally because it's kind of scary, and that is going to be Horrid, and this is by Katrina Leno. And this particular book has a lot of the elements, but like with a spooky twist. So the Gilmore Girls actually takes place in New England, and so does Horrid. The Gilmore Girls specifically focuses on a relationship between a mother, a daughter, and also a grandma who is very wealthy, and that is also what happens in this book. The main character is a teenager, she's very close to her mom, and they end up going to move into the grandmother's old home in New England, and it feels very Gilmore-esque in a lot of different ways, especially because they come from a lot of money in New England, and they're kind of unpacking a lot of things that happened to the mom in her youth growing up in that house. Also, the main character is a huge, huge bookworm. But I kind of mean that literally, because like the weird part about this is that the main character eats books. So it's like Rory Gilmore isn't even at her level, you know? It's a scary book though. It's a little bit about like, is their house haunted? What's really happening? What's the backstory to a lot of things? But as far as like the elements, the relationships, and also like the town itself, it feels very, very Gilmore-esque, especially the town. So yeah, if you're looking for Gilmore Girls but spooky, check this out. The next one I have is going to be You. So You is a series that I have just started watching, so I don't know as much about it. It's very creepy, okay? It's scary for me anyways. I don't know. We're following Joe, and Joe is iconic, I guess, in a bad way. He is actually a bookstore manager, and he ends up seeing a girl who he immediately has like chemistry with or really, really likes. Her name is Beck. He ends up basically falling in love with her, but he turns out to be a bad guy, okay? Like we're in the mind of basically a psychopath. And it's interesting because we're seeing how he is reasoning with the decisions that he's making, and the decisions are icky. He is icky. And the book that I would highly pair this with is going to be For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. For Your Own Good is following Teddy, and Teddy is a teacher at a private preparatory school, and Teddy is just like Joe in the sense that he is a bit of a psychopath, but he's doing it for people's own good. So he likes to teach his colleagues and students different lessons on how to become better people, but his methods are quite questionable, much like Joe's. I also feel like this book is great because it has very, very dark humor, but it's not all dark. It's like kind of funny in parts, it's kind of lighthearted in parts, and it's very engaging and addicting, much like you. Next up is The Umbrella Academy. Oh my God, you guys, I had to do this series. I am obsessed with this series. I've actually never seen the other 2 seasons because I keep just rewatching the first season. I'm afraid that the other seasons are gonna let me down. I am so obsessed with it though. It's incredible. It is on Netflix and it's basically like sci-fi, kind of feels like fantasy, but it's definitely sci-fi. And it's about this eccentric billionaire who went around collecting all of these orphans who were mysteriously born on the exact same day. I think there were like 43 children who were born on this day, and he ends up adopting them, and they all have like powers, and they were all born to people who were not pregnant. They like got pregnant and delivered the baby in one day, which talk about traumatic, you know? He ends up adopting 7, and all 7 he kind of names after numbers. So like number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, all the way down to number 7. And he basically trains them to be superheroes. And they end up like forming this team and going and like saving a bunch of people. And then the team dissipates when one of them disappears. And it's just about them coming together as adults after their father or like adopted father died. Also, side note, do you want to know who actually wrote The Umbrella Academy? You're gonna be shocked. You know that guy who sang that song, "When I was a young boy, my father"? The Black Parade? Yeah, he wrote this. He wrote The Umbrella Academy. I'm sorry. Can some of us have some of your talent, sir? So even though I really, really wanted to do this series, I had no idea what book to put for it. And I ended up researching so much for this. I found a lot of recommendations, none of which I ended up liking enough to keep, until I went down a rabbit hole on Reddit and found one person recommend this in the comments. I looked it up. It has incredibly high reviews on Goodreads by a lot of people, and that is called Spoonbenders, and this is by Daryl Gregory. This is an adult sci-fi, and apparently it's also really, really funny, which I think pairs well with the show because the show sounds serious, and it is, but it's also hilarious, and I think that's why I like it so much. It's very well-rounded. This is about a family who all have different abilities, and they're not so much magical as they are like sci-fi, like mind control or astral projection or telekinesis, like really cool things. However, all of their powers mysteriously disappear, and they end up kind of like shrinking back from society, and they're like really, really shamed until the FBI, I think, in the CIA and the mafia all tried to kill the family or hurt the family, and now they all have to come together and try to raise their powers basically from the dead just to survive and protect themselves. I'm very excited to read this. I'm definitely going to be picking this up soon. Hopefully the vibes match the TV series. Next up is going to be Heartstopper. So I'm obsessed with Heartstopper. It is one of the most wholesome and happy TV series that I've ever personally watched on Netflix. We're following Charlie and Nick, and they end up being friends, but then they end up kind of being like possibly a little bit more. It's a very, very sweet friends to lovers storyline, and it's all about them in high school and their group of friends, and it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Now, most of these TV series that I have actually mentioned have books or graphic novels that they are based on. For example, The Umbrella Academy is actually based on the graphic novel series, and I've been really trying hard to not just recommend that. I'm trying to more recommend things that match the vibe without being the exact same story. However, this is my exception. If you have not read the graphic novels that go along with Heartstopper, I think you're doing yourself a disservice because these are gold. Literally, I feel like the television series adapted these perfectly, and these are so wholesome and fun to read. So if you love the story, please pick up the original. But also, if you are looking for a totally new series, I highly recommend checking out Fence. And Fence is by C.S. Pacat and also Johanna the Mad, and there are little cat hairs on mine. Okay, great. So this particular series starts out following a guy named Nick, and Nick is trying to become a fencer to get the attention of his estranged father. He is the illegitimate son of this guy who is a world-class fencer, and this guy is not giving Nick the time of day. And so Nick basically wants to become good so that he can kind of stick it to his dad. And he ends up trying to get on this fencing team at this preparatory school, and his roommate is actually like his mortal enemy. But like the reason I think it would be great for people who absolutely loved Heartstopper is because this is pretty wholesome as well. All of the friendships on the fencing team really feel wholesome and sweet, and you get like the same vibes of like giddiness and like happiness and contentment that I think you would get from Heartstopper. I also love the representation in this. So in Heartstopper, one of the best things about it is the representation, and I think one of the best parts of Fence is the representation, because there are quite a few LGBTQ plus characters in here as well, and that plus the friendships plus like this kind of game aspect of all of them are competing with each other and also competing with other schools just makes for a very wholesome and fun experience. And I think fans of Heartstopper are definitely going to be fans of Fence. Okay, next up is a television series that I think is arguably possibly the darkest on this list. It's pretty dark, and it's called The Magicians. Again, this was actually based on a group of books. I have read the first one by Lee Grossman called The Magicians. This television series is following Quentin, and Quentin is trying to get into different colleges. He feels really lost. And then one day there's like this magical portal that opens up, and he and his friend Julia end up testing to see if they can get into this magic school. And the magic system in this world is really based highly on like intelligence. It's very dark, but it is so well done. It's basically about his adventures in this magic school, but then also it's parallel to a world that's kind of similar to like Narnia, and it's amazing. It's honestly so good, but don't watch it if you're like younger, because it's so traumatic. Like the first time I watched it, I felt like sick to my stomach. I was like, this is dark. So I've got 3 different recommendations here. Let's go with the obvious ones first. If you are basically just interested in like an adult Hogwarts University, check out one of these 2 books. We've got Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, or we've got The Witch Haven, and this is by Sasha Payne Smith. This is a YA book, and we're focusing more on like high school age people here. This is an adult scary book, and we are focusing on college students here. This particular book I think is the best magic school that I have personally read about since Hogwarts, in my personal opinion. We're following a girl, I think in the early 1900s, who lives in New York, and her boss tries to attack her when she randomly kills him, and she discovers that she has magical abilities. The next day, as the police are looking for her, she's actually snatched up by 2 nurses, and the nurses then take her to a magic school. They say that they're taking her to an asylum, but actually it's a magic school for girls, and she learns how to do the magic. While the school is really interesting, really it's her friendships and like the stuff she gets up to around the school that's even more of the focus of the plot, and it's really good. And then of course we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is following Alex, and Alex belongs to kind of like a society at Yale. There are all of these magical little secret societies in Yale, and they can all do magic, and Alex is basically there just to make sure that they don't do anything illegal in the magic world. She's kind of like the magical police, and she can see ghosts, and it's just about her on campus with magical secret societies. It's very Magicians vibey though. And then the last one, I don't know why, but this honestly has the same exact vibes of The Magician, even though it's slightly different, and that's going to be An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. This is an adult fantasy, and it's an urban fantasy, and it's so good. In this world, we are following the elite magical families that live in Manhattan, New York. All of these elite magical families come together, I think once every 10 years, to compete in a magical competition where the families all compete for magical dominance, and like the top family that wins wields like all of the power or something like that. And it's very good. These people give you big Slytherin vibes. Like they are ready to do anything to make sure that their family comes out on top. I can't explain why, but the vibes of this one match the vibes of The Magicians perfectly. Next up, let's talk about Lock and Key. I love Lock and Key so much. Again, this is one that you can find on Netflix. This is about a family, and the father has just been murdered tragically, and now they don't have any place to go, and so they decide to go to the father's house where he grew up because it is abandoned and it is a mansion. And we're following 3 different siblings and their single mom all going to this mansion, and the mansion has some sketchy things going on. This house has different keys, and the keys can actually unlock different magical abilities. It is wild, and it is so addicting, and it is so good, and I am so obsessed with it. Again, I've only seen the first season, but I've seen the first season like multiple times. Now, this is based on a graphic novel series, but I've actually heard that the graphic novel series does not match the vibes of this Netflix series tonally. The Netflix series kind of reads almost like a scary middle grade, kind of, whereas I've heard that the graphic novels are much more horrific. And so I'm matching the vibes of the Netflix series instead of the graphic novel series. So here we go. I have two recommendations. The first one is going to be the Amulet series, and this is by Kazu Kibushi. This series is following two siblings, a sister and a brother, and their single mom, and their father has also just passed away, and now they are driving in their car, and they are going to the dad's, I think, old family manor where their grandfather used to live, but like their grandfather has passed away, or like he's missing or something. And so they're all going to try staying in this mansion when the children actually find a secret passage that leads to a different world. So again, it is different than Lock and Key, but it also has a lot of similar elements, and they remind me of each other very, very much. And then the next one is the Spiderwick Chronicles, which I haven't read, but I did purchase. I don't know where my copy is though, you guys. I need to reorganize my books. I've lost everything behind me, okay? The next one is going to be the Spiderwick Chronicles, which again has a very, very similar premise. It's about three siblings and their mom who are all going to stay in this mansion that is in the family. I think it belonged to the mom's father, I want to say. And while they are there, they find that their grandfather has put all of this research into the Fae world. They can actually start to see the Fae world, which sounds really sweet, but it's actually terrifying, and there's a lot of monsters and bad things that kind of try to get them. And I feel like specifically the vibes of the Spiderwick Chronicles movie fits the vibes of Lock and Key, sort of. So if you've seen that movie, I think you would agree that it reminds you a little bit of Lock and Key. So I think that the book is also going to do that. Next up, let's talk about Bridgerton. Bridgerton is one of my comfort series. I love the Duke. I love Anthony, okay? Give me all the romance. I'm excited for season 3. Bridgerton is basically a Regency era romance, and we are following different women as they are coming out and being courted essentially by fine gentlemen. And it's great because it's sexy, but it's also classy. I don't know. You feel like very posh while watching it, but also it's hot. So I've picked 2 books for this. I could have picked quite a few Regency romance books. I actually did an entire video based on books to read if you enjoyed Bridgerton, but I picked 2 here. One is actually going to be a modern take, and then the other one is a classic. So let's start with the classic. I highly recommend checking out Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I feel like this is quite obvious. Specifically, season 2 I know was very heavily inspired by Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice is following Elizabeth Bennet, and Elizabeth Bennet is kind of from like a family that's a little bit more poor. She ends up meeting Mr. Darcy at a party when his friend is interested in her sister Jane. She thinks he's attractive, but then he is a total and so she's like, you know what? I don't like you. And honestly, good for you, Lizzie. Good for you. But it's basically about their love story and how they both hate each other, and then they grow to be madly in love with each other. And the vibes are so good, okay? They're there and they're great. And then if you want kind of like a more modern take, but you also want it to kind of still feel like Bridgerton, highly recommend checking out Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This particular book actually takes place in the Lake District, so it feels very picturesque, just like Bridgerton does. And they have like very beautiful aesthetics both in the book and also in the television series. So if you love the aesthetics of one, you'll probably really like the aesthetics of the other. And this is following Eve Brown, and Eve Brown can't get her life together. She comes from a very wealthy, posh family, but she's basically been cut off and she has to try to get a job. And she ends up becoming a baker slash chef at this little inn where she meets Jacob, and they have a grumpy sunshine dynamic. I wouldn't say it's exactly enemies to lovers, but it's kind of like an enemies to lovers because they don't like each other at all at first, even though they're very attracted to each other. And it's about their romance in this little inn in England, in the Lake District. It's lovely, it's funny, it's sweet, and I really think that if you like Bridgerton, you'll really like this book. And then finally, I actually had to make sure that I was going to include The Great British Bake Off. The Great British Bake Off is my comfort show, okay? I don't care at all about the competition. It's just like the vibes of the show though, you know? Everyone is friendly with each other. They're all baking muffins and breads and cupcakes, and it's very different from American reality competition shows. Like, no one is smack talking each other. They're all helping each other. It's so wholesome. It's so comforting and relaxing. And if you are a girly with anxiety, you know how important it is to like watch shows that have zero like anxiety inducing things. This is it, okay? This is my show. And I wanted to match these books, not with the competition aspect because I don't care about that, but with the comfort aspect. So both of these books that I will be sharing with you have the comfort aspects of this. So they both include baking and breads, but they also just feel like comfort, relaxing, cozy reads. The first one is going to be Legends and Lattes, and this is by Travis Baldree. This is an adult fantasy, and it is a self-proclaimed high fantasy with low stakes. We're following an orc named Viv, and Viv has retired from adventuring. She is sick of slaying dragons. She ends up starting a coffee shop, and she finds like a little baker who is this little mouse, and the way that this is described with like the coffee and the cinnamon rolls rising, and how like the aroma of the coffee beans and the cinnamon rolls entice all of the townspeople to come in and sit down is just immaculate. It's so wonderful. There's a little bit of a lighthearted romance in here as well between Viv and also the barista, and it's just so wholesome and wonderful. Even if you don't like fantasy, pick it up, okay? It will become your next favorite comfort read. And then the last one here is going to be Sourdough, or Lois and the Adventures in the Underground Market by Robin Sloan, and this is an adult contemporary. This book is following Lois, and Lois is very unhappy at her job, and she is one day gifted a sourdough starter. She learns that she has to take care of this almost like a pet. She ends up falling in love with the act of baking, and she becomes really obsessed with baking sourdough. There is a slight competition element in this because she decides she wants to start trying to sell this at a farmer's market, and she has to go up against all of these other bakers to get a spot at this market, and it's just so wholesome. And I think, you guys, that's it. My God, we talked about a lot of books today. I hope you found one or two new books that you would like to try, but also, do you have any recommendations for me? Are there any books that you think would fit these television series really well? Or do you have recommendations for like other TV series and other books that you think pair really well together? Let me know down below. And once again, a huge thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring today's video. I highly recommend checking them out. All of the links will be down in my description if you are interested, so be sure to check that out before you leave. And also be sure to use my discount code. And if you have made it to this part of the video, please leave me, is there like a movie or a TV emoji? Because if there is, let's do that. Any like movie or TV emoji. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love all of you so very much. And until next time, book lovers, keep your head in the clouds and your heart in a book. And I will talk to you very soon. Bye.
Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air at that time. Don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat on my skin takes me back to the time met you.